Welcome to 4-Minute Film School. My name is Valentina V, and today we're going to be talking about how to make someone look younger or older using only light. Let's go. Hey, today I'm with Jon Salmon. He's a cinematographer here in Los Angeles, and he's lit many a famous face like J-Lo and Drake, Patton Oswalt, just to name a few. And it makes perfect sense that he's here for this episode because it's all about lighting faces, specifically using light to age people up and age people down. So Jon, what are some rules of thumb that we should be aware of when using lighting to manipulate age?
So a few things for you guys to remember. One, lighting is a lot like makeup. So if there's a blemish or something you're trying to hide, often we'll point a light at that blemish to erase it.
Like concealer with makeup.
Exactly. Also, the larger the source is, the more flattering it'll be. It's kind of like applying a base to someone's face. It softens things out. And lastly, the closer the light source is to the person's eyeline, that will also make it more flattering.
So the eyeline where they're looking,
Exactly.
You gotta get the light close.
Put the light where they're looking.
All right, let's take a look at the first setup. Okay, so our first setup, what kind of look are we going for?
I wanted to go for like a sort of horror meets silent film kind of vibe, grimy and spooky.
The whole point is to make the actress look older, but the first light you placed was actually for location purposes. What was that?
The first light I placed was a 300D with a spotlight attachment directly behind the actress, pointing straight back and creating a pool of light on the floor that kind of skipped up into an ombre effect. It kind of creates a natural vignette on the brick wall behind her.
Why do we need that to achieve that effect?
Yeah, it's kind of like putting on like a long lens. It narrows the light into a really sharp funnel that you can shape however you want to. And for our purposes, it allowed us to have a really specific hot pool of light right in the spot we wanted directly behind her where it would skip up really nicely.
So you can control the light and also the spill off, and you could create that little halo. So the second light that you placed was actually for the purposes of looking old or looking unflattering. What was that?
That was the LS1C with a chimera, control grid, and diffusion, placed about 2 feet above the actress, almost directly above her. We wanted to do that because that's one of the most unflattering places you can put a light on somebody. It rakes down, it shows off the imperfections, any wrinkles, anything like that. It also creates raccoon eyes.
Yeah.
So it can be really dreary.
In an office, like you always have that top light, it looks really gross. But what I like about this light that you placed is it also pinged off the cage in the front. And it was kind of like a 2-for-1 light, both on the talent and on the environment. So for the third light, I noticed that you had a little light panel that was like right in her lap. What was that light?
So that light was an F7 and it was wrapped in diffusion. We literally just set it in the actress's lap. My idea was basically like if flattering light is normally in this frontal kind of direction, you want to do the opposite if you want to have unflattering light. You want to bring out as many imperfections. So I put one light on top and one light on bottom. Also, I was trying to evoke the horror genre a little bit. So uplight is a classic thing to do in old horror. And then lastly, I staged the actress to kind of look down and then look up with her eyes. So she just had a tiny dot in the very bottom and had this really kind of creepy, dreary effect. It's like Kubrick-y.
Yeah, I like it. Let's take a look. So for the second setup, you're not trying to make the character look older, you're not trying to make her look younger. What's the point?
So the idea here is a happy medium. I want the light to be flattering and favorable to the subject, but I also still want a dramatic feel. I want something moody. I don't want to just flatten her out, but I want her to look her best. It's whatever the script is really calling for, but in this instance, I thought it'd be interesting to show a character with a lot of conflict. That's why I made it a cop at a bar.
So I noticed that for your key light, you actually used 2 lights and you made them work like one continuous light. How did you do that?
What I did is I took 2 120Ds. I had one going into a bounce further from the eyeline, and then closer to the eyeline, I had a 120D going through a light dome. So it was a way of kind of wrapping the key. I had the brightest part on the bounce, and then I had it get a little lighter and a little more direct as it got closer to the eyeline. And that's kind of how I pulled off the key light.
So it makes it wrap around her face. The shadows aren't harsh. It's still like a beautiful sort of soft lighting, but it's from the other side of her face. So you had no fill, basically.
Exactly. The choice was to Julia Swain it to have no fill.
Another great instructor you should check out on our channel. And you had another light on her face, a Mini 20. What was that for?
So this is a very subtle accent. All I did with the Mini 20 was I bounced it into a white bounce card, and it was just to create a little bit more shape on the back of her face. I thought it was starting to kind of get muddy over there in the shadow area. So sorry, Julia, I betrayed you.
And then one last light that you put in the background, you hazed it all up so that it would create a nice shaft of light. What light did you place there?
So I took a 300D and I used a spotlight mount and I hid that inside of the elevator shaft and I just shot it out through some haze so we kind of create some like New York smoky bar kind of rays of light coming in.
Looks very cool. Let's take a look. So for our third and final lighting setup, it is to make someone look as young as possible.
Yeah.
So what is the rule of thumb here?
So the rule of thumb is basically, like we said in the beginning, you want to treat lighting the way you treat makeup. If there's a blemish, if there's something you want to hide, maybe a wrinkle, point a light at it. Find a sweet spot and you can hide it by putting light on it.
And you sure did. There's a lot of lights pointed at the subject.
Yeah.
But first is the practicals in the background. So what was going on?
There's some bulbs in the background. We dimmed them down ever so slightly and we got a little bit of flicker while we were preparing. We tweaked the shutter speed and found a sweet spot around 172 degrees of the angle, basically. And the flicker went away.
And then so your key light was what?
My key light was a bunch of stuff all together. It was two 120Ds, a 300D, all shooting into a book light going through bleached muslin.
So the term book light, what does that mean? And why would you use a book light instead of like, I don't know, like 3 levels of diffusion?
A book light is basically, it looks like a book because basically you take a light, you bounce it, you shoot it into a bounce, and then you put a layer of diffusion from the light coming off of that bounce. It's an especially soft quality of light because you're essentially using 2 different techniques of diffusing light. There's bouncing light and then there's also putting diffusion in front of it, and you get this gorgeous, really forgiving kind of sourceless light.
So for the next light, what did you add?
The next light I put up was a 120D going through a light dome that had diffusion, baffling, and grid on it, and then also a layer of half straw. That was a way of sort of wrapping that already soft source. I wanted to bring a little bit more into her eyes and just fill in around her nose any shadows that I was seeing.
You know, you can put the straw into the gel holder inside the light dome, but you also put straw on all of the lights that you had in your book light, which was really easily done by just like gaff taping them, which is cool because LED lights are cool to the touch, so you can't really do that with hot lights. And how about the next light?
The next light we put in was, I noticed there was a little bit too much shadow over here, right under like her nose, and so we put up a Mini 20. We took a Mini 20 and shot it into like a white bounce card and allowed her to skip back and just fill in just a little bit of this side of her face. I was still trying to create a very soft wrap, but per like our rule that we've set for the scene, I wanted to point a light at every single little shadow.
So now you have this like beautiful soft lighting, but it's all kind of coming from the front. So what did you add?
Yeah, to give it a little more of a 3-dimensional effect and pop her out from the background, I created an edge light using an LS1S. That had a chimera on it, a grid. It was all very soft was the rule here, and it was just off over her right shoulder, just above her head, just out of frame, creating kind of a soft edge popping this side. The practicals were already popping out the left side. This was to help to make her pop on the right side.
I really like this lighting setup because it can be used for a lot of things, but especially interviews, and that's sort of what you had her set up as. And most of the time, people who are giving you interviews, they might not be well versed in how they want to be lit. They're just gonna tell you, make me look good, and that's it. So This is definitely a way that you can do that.
This is the recipe I used on J-Lo.
Well,
drop.
Let's take a look. So that is your episode on how to use lighting to make someone look older or younger or just like their best glowy self. What are those tips again, John?
So you want to use larger, softer sources to create a more flattering light. You want to treat lighting like makeup. So if there's a blemish or a wrinkle you want to hide, you want to point a light at it. And lighting is most flattering when you keep the light coming from near the eye line, the place where the actor is looking.
That's right. If you like this episode, go ahead and follow Aputure on all our social media channels. We share a lot of cool stuff on Instagram. You can follow John on Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter. That takes us to our question of the day, which is,
what are some of your favorite examples from movies or TV shows of unflattering light?
And I kind of want to see links. So go ahead and put that in the comments, and then the best answer will win an Aputure MW, which is our new underwater light. That's it for this episode. We'll see you guys later.